Welcome everybody. Today's webinar, we're going to talk about managing assets. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Michelle Fitzgerald and I'm a business consultant here at Nimbus Software. I've worked here for a number of years now and I'm excited to be showing you one of our core products in the Nimbus database. So also with me is our new Michelle, to my right. Michelle Van Dyke. She's our new sales and marketing assistant. She's going to be monitoring the chat and going through any questions that come through at the end of this webinar. So now, speaking of webinars and topics, we've got an exciting topic for our webinar scheduled for April. We haven't sent that out yet, but in the meantime, we're wondering if you could give some thought to other subjects that you might like us to cover off in our next webinar that we'll be holding in March. So have a think about that through the course of this, and you can either email us with your ideas of things that you might want to see or put it in the chat for the end of the webinar. Right, so let's crack on with this webinar. Essentially, if your organisation runs a lot of plant and machinery, then this product can help you analyse which items are profitable or not, what needs replacing, and ensure that costs are recovered onto your jobs. In addition, the Nimbus Asset Maintenance and Asset Register is great at helping you manage the repairs and maintenance of your fleet by scheduling in preventative maintenance. Along with this, the Asset Register records all your assets purchased, the date they were purchased, who from, the purchase value, and monthly depreciation can be calculated, as well as tax depreciation at the end of the year. So let's take a bit of a look at what we're going to cover off with this short webinar today. So really, asset management is about taking the guesswork out of things. So the session's objectives is to show you how easy it is to manage assets and how it just integrates nicely with your workflow. We're going to look at how easy it is to calculate the profitability of each of your plant items, planning and scheduling your maintenance, your regular preventative maintenance, and also it gives you the opportunity to see that you can actually have your information in one source, being the Nimbus database. So it's a good opportunity to get rid of those spreadsheets that you might have outside the database where your costs are recorded, or you're looking at your value or your depreciation, and then, you know, potentially you're only recording what you recover in Nimbus. So this gets everything into one place for easy analysis. So today's agenda, we're just going to go through a few of the basics, and this really should just give you a taster of how easy it is to use. So we're going to create an asset. We're going to look at how we manage preventative maintenance, analyze your asset costs and also your revenue, and so therefore checking your profitability. And we're going to touch a little bit at the end on how you actually run your depreciation. So let's crack on, shall we? Oh, I'm glad I'm here. Okay, so I'm just running my local demo here. So I'm just going to use this to highlight some areas of the Nimbus asset management. So I guess one of the things that it's worthwhile noting around assets and the management of these and any regular tasks and things that apply to your assets or plant is that a lot of things can be automated and set around the actual model that you apply your asset to. So if we take a look at what that means in Nimbus, we'll click on the models item here, and you'll be able to see that in my database, I've got different models, and that sort of relates to the different types of assets or plant and machinery I might have. So, you know, we've got buildings, cars, computer equipment, office, plant and trucks. It's just a small group of models, but some organisations might have hundreds of models of assets. Now, the model and the setup of the model helps automate some items when you actually create an asset in Nimbus and purchase an asset. So if we look at our trucks model, for example, what this indicates is that there's some standard tasks that are set up when you create an asset belonging to the truck model. So if we're going out and buying a new 18-wheeler or a dump truck or a loader or anything, we can use this model. And what will happen when we do that is it'll automatically create a capital item job, a road user charge, maintenance and repair job, running costs, a service job, and a warrant of fitness job. So, and that all helps set that item up, and those things fall into the natural workflow that you have defined in your Nimbus database. Now, to help us identify, excuse me, those jobs, some of them have a job number prefix. So capital items, the job number is always created, it starts with Z. Okay, our rucks or our hubbos is H. Running costs are, servicing is S, and our warrant of fitness is W. I mean, that's just an example of how we can identify different jobs set up for our assets. So that's the truck model. If we look at our plant model, you'll see here that we've still got our capital item and our maintenance and repairs and our running costs and our service, but the ones that have an option of what ticked here for COF and service means that they're not automatically created. So not all plant may require a COF. For example, I don't ever remember having to get a COF on a sort of like a concrete pump or a concrete float or anything like that when I was working in the construction industry. But certainly you might need to get COFs on other things like excavators or diggers and things like that. So that's why in this case it's an optional item. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to create a new asset and show you how the model setup and these tasks affects the process. So I'm going to start with my asset list. Okay, and you'll see here I've got a few different things in here, some cars, computers, plant, trucks and whatnot, but over here I've got a header link and I'm going to create a new asset item. So some organisations whereby we've got trucks and utes and things like that, they might use the registration number as the asset item index. You might have your own system. I'm just going to keep it in easy, and I'm going to purchase a 40-tonne excavator. So I'm going to just call it EX40. Now, here's where I get to choose the model that this relates to. So it's going to be plant. It's not a truck, certainly not a computer. So it's definitely plant. And because we're buying this excavator for my own business, then it's against an internal debtor. Now, with asset maintenance in Nimbus, it's not just about managing your own assets. If you manage your external clients' assets or have service level agreements, it might be that you have asset maintenance set up for external customers as well. So there's that option to have that just by defining who that is and having a particular model for that. I'm going to store our new 40-tonne excavator in our main yard, and I need to choose an asset group. Now we're going to circle back to asset groups at the end, and this is the asset group helps define your depreciation type. So we'll circle back to that, but I still need to select it. We're buying it new. Okay, so if I click on apply here, that's created my item. And in here, I know that I'm actually going to take purchase of this probably tomorrow. So I'm going to put in tomorrow's date to sort of start that whole service time frame for our preventative maintenance. Now, the other thing is I'm going to be using my 40-tonne excavator on sites. So I'm going to be sending it out to jobs and doing work. and I'm going to be charging our customers for the use of this excavator. So at the same time as creating the asset, I might as well set up the charge code. So this charge code is used to post the hours that that excavator is used to the actual job. Now, I've chosen that it might be charged as an hour, like an hourly thing, but the reality is you could have a charge code that if you're only ever going to charge it out at half day or daily rates, for example. For my charge codes with my assets, I always start them with P and then keep the actual code exactly the same as the asset item. So EX40. So I'm just going to fill out the rest of this. Now it's part of my plant category. And my plant section. So here we can choose the unit of measure. So I'm going to choose hours. And I'm not really 100% sure of what the cost is going to be per hour to us, but I estimate it to be about $150. So I'm thinking if it's going to cost us $150 an hour to run this excavator, I'd like a decent return. So I'm going to sell that to the jobs for $250. Now you can see here that it's automatically linked it to that asset item that we've set up. So I'm going to click OK on here. And if we look at the list, we can see we've now got our 40-ton excavator here. If we click on that to look at any transactions, we can see that there are none at this point. Now, to get the asset onto our balance sheet in Nimbus, we need to buy it in. So we're going to do that through processing. I'm going to show you the manual process, just so that you can see step by step the impact it has. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to raise a purchase order to the supplier where we're purchasing the excavator from. Alrighty, so I get all my plant from Keller Investments. I can give it an expected delivery date if I want to. But here I'm looking for my capital job that automatically was created when I created the asset item. So you'll see here it is in the list. Now, I'm just going to use a non-stock code for the actual buying it in. And I'm pretty sure it's going to cost us about $247,000. It's pretty big. Whoops. Oh, my bad. I put the cost in the quantity. That looks a little bit better, doesn't it? Okay, so that raises a purchase order in Nimbus. So if we refresh this list here, we can see here that our excavator's on order. So when we receive the excavator and then subsequently the invoice from the supplier, we can process that through. Now, if you've got Nimbus Scan, then essentially that invoice would come through and be scanned through from Nimbus Scan and you'd process it through that. Alternatively, if you don't have Nimbus Scan, then you can process the invoice through this arrive pricing area. So we've got the date and the invoice number. Here's our item. It's got a status of on ordered. We certainly did receive said excavator and it did cost us $247,000. And we're going to process the invoice for that. Okay, easy, just like that. So if we come back to our asset list now, and we look at our EX40, we can see here that we've got the purchase of the item, the actual capital job. So that's then updated our balance sheet in Nimbus as well with that asset, which is great. Okay, so once we have an asset, the reality is that there's certain other running costs, not just preventative maintenance. So we're going to check. I think if we come back and we look at our models here, but just by clicking on this, oh, wrong one, my apologies. So if we click on our model here for our excavator, there's our capital one we've already bought the item to. We've got maintenance and repairs job, and we've got running costs. Now, I know that an excavator does need a COF, so I'm going to click on this extra options available, and you can see that it's created these first 3 tasks, but it hasn't automatically created our COF. So if I want to add a COF job here, all I need to do is click on that, and it automatically adds that to the list for this asset item, which is pretty handy. And along with the COF and so on, we've got running costs that are incurred on assets. So, it could be things like fuel, could be tyres, could be all sorts of things, just standard sort of run-of-the-mill stuff. So these might be processed and with external suppliers. So, fuel is an obvious one. It's not uncommon for monthly invoices to come in from your fuel provider. They could come in through Nimbus Scan, like I say, or we could process an invoice from the supplier directly into Nimbus against the job. So I'm a big fan of Caltex. So I've got a regular invoice that comes in, and I can put these against the running job of my asset. So here's my running job for my EX Excavator 40. Just using a non-stock code, and I received like 200 litres of fuel at $2.98. Yep, I want to process that, so I need to pay Caltex, and then also that records that cost against that asset. So I circle back here and I click on here, and you can see that the transactions relating to my asset item are starting to build up. Okay. If we are using the excavator on jobs, then it's a matter of posting the usage of the excavator to those jobs. Now, there's different mechanisms for collecting that data. A lot of the time, plant and machinery is used out on sites. If you utilize any of the Nimbus mobile technology, the reality is that you might be recording how much your plant has been used in the field, and this then comes through to Nimbus via that mechanism, or it can be collected on a sheet. Some people still do use job sheets and recorded via the job posting module in Nimbus. So I basically am using this excavator out on a site. So we've got a job here for clearing a site. So here's where I utilize my charge code. So my PX40, I know what it is, or alternatively, I can look it up. And I used that excavator for 10 hours. So that's then that's recorded on that job. And then what that means is when we raise an invoice to that customer, they're going to get billed for 10 hours of use of the excavator. Okay, so that's sort of like collecting some costs and also posting the usage of your plant on jobs where relevant. Not all assets are used on jobs, and there's no sort of revenue recovery for them, like computers that we use or our office gear, but sort of like your typical things like your plant machinery and vehicles and things like that. You might be charging mileage for those to your customers or hourly use and so on. But what I want to just touch on now is like the preventative maintenance. So how you can easily manage that in your organization. And it's a really easy thing to do in Nimbus. So what we're going to do here is we're going to our asset menu and we're going to look at our planned work. Now, there's different ways that we can filter, how far in advance we want to look at any scheduled work that we want coming up. So I'm just looking ahead to the next 3 months. So anything where the days to go is 90 or less. Okay, you can see these negatives here. I'm overdue, crikey, by nearly a year on a couple of things for my antivirus updates on our laptops. But you can see here that this gives us a list of any planned work or preventative maintenance that we might need to raise jobs for in our organisation. Now, it could be that whereby you have a lot of plant and machinery, you might have your own internal workshop team that does the lion's share of the work on maintaining and repairing or servicing these things, or it might be that you subcontract that work out to a supplier that you work with. Also COFs, so they might be done externally. Where you get recurring jobs for road user charges, well, essentially that's going to involve a supplier. But what this is showing us here is the stuff that we've got coming up to look at in the next 3 months. So, for example, we can see here that we've got some service jobs that are going to be potentially due, but in particular, I'm going to look at these COFs. Okay, so we've got COFs due in just under 3 months. And you can see here that we've got our new 40-ton excavator. Okay, so as time draws nearer on these jobs, and this is something that potentially you might have someone who's in charge of all your gear responsible for, they keep an eye on when servicing is due, and what they can do is then they can issue these jobs automatically. Now, depending on the settings that you've got for these jobs, essentially the desired effect is that when you issue these jobs, they then fall into the normal workflow of your organisation. So if you've got a workshop, then it might be that these jobs are created, assigned to the workshop supervisor and allocated to their team. But the reality is that if I want to issue all these jobs, I'm just filtering to the jobs that I want, and I can click on this button, and that's made jobs for all of the COFs for these items. Okay, now I can easily see that by looking in my job list. Okay, and you can see here that I've done this a couple of times today because I had a practice run through before and also yesterday, but I've got my COF jobs here that then can be used to record the costs of actually, getting a COF done for my plant. Okay, so that's cool. So it might be that we raise a purchase order against that job to get somebody external to do it, or it might be that we record time and materials and parts against that job if we're doing the COF ourselves in-house. Okay, so that gives you an idea of how you can use the planned and scheduled maintenance stuff in Nimbus. The cool thing about this is that once the work is done on this job, okay, and it's posted and recorded and the job is closed, what that then does is updates the asset with the next service date due based on the frequency of that. So when we look at our 40-ton excavator, we know it says here that the COF needs doing every 3 months. So when I close that job, it will then recalculate the next scheduled date for 3 months after that job is closed. So it automatically maintains that for you. Now, where you don't have a need for a regular scheduled service, there is the possibility to create other jobs relating to the plant. And if I go to my workshop list report here, we can see, for example, if something got damaged on some of our gear and we need something done, we can create a job to actually make that repair. So automatically allocates the client, automatically links to the asset. So it might be that I'm repairing the windscreen. I'm going to allocate that to Adam, who's in charge of our workshop. We can give an idea of the priority of it and when it's due by. So it's kind of medium priority. So essentially, I'd like this sorted by the 28th of Feb. So I can put in my due date and create this job. And once again, it's going to fall into the workflow that I've got defined in my database. Right. So that gives you a bit of an idea about some of the maintenance aspects of plant and other assets. What I'd like to do now is look at where you can analyse your costs and your income and the profitability of your plant and material machinery. So I'm going to click on this profitability report here. Now this is just summarising some of the plant that I have here, and we can see that we've got various different columns. So if I wanted to look at the costs that are related to running a particular plant, now this is life to date. So essentially this is looking at all the costs, all the revenue, all the depreciation on each of our items, since we've actually purchased the item. So if I can look at our new 40-ton excavator here, and if I click on my link, my cost link, then what it does is it drills down and we can see the only sort of running costs that we've got at this point in time was used on this running job. If I click on the link, then it drills down to the detail and we can see that's the fuel that I purchased for it. If I look at something else that has a lot more costs, let's look at our Bobcat here. We can see that we've got other costs that have accumulated over the course of the life of this piece of machinery. So we've got some repairs here, service, and some other running costs. And once again, we can click on the job and see what makes up the running costs of that job. So we can see here that there was a cable required and some fuel. And I guess the other cool thing about this is it identifies the task index. Now, when you're setting up your models and tasks in the very beginning, you can define as many of these as you want. So if you wanted to have your fuel as a separate task, you could have created that and it would be identified in here. But this helps you analyze what creates the bulk of your costs for each particular plant item. And so further reports can be created and used to break that down and give you overall visibility of what costs you're accumulating. I mean, for any of you who watched our webinars on reporting, you'll know that there's multiple options available. So that shows our running costs. Our revenue, this is where we've used the items on chargeable jobs. So if we click on that, we can see the jobs that we used this particular plant item on. And once again, we can drill down to the jobs and we can show the dates, the how many hours and quantities and so on, which is also useful. Right, I think we're looking okay for time. I don't have too much more. So, and then the other cool thing about this report is that it shows our depreciation. And so we've got our gross recovery, which is our revenue less our costs, then our depreciation and our net recovery. It also helps us identify our run cost per unit. So if we're charging it by the hour, that's the running cost per hour, and that's based on this cost column, or the total cost per unit, which incorporates depreciation. Now, what we've also got here is our sell price. So what rate we're recovering that at when we use our plant on jobs. So this is easily identifies if you've got your rate set correctly. You might need to make some adjustments, put some items up, and so on. Okay, so that sort of covers off sort of looking at some cost, your revenue, a preventative maintenance. and setup. So the other thing that we're going to look at is depreciation. Now, just quickly, we mentioned our asset groups. The asset group is where we identify what type of depreciation we're applying to our plant items. Now, I've only got one asset group. That's uncommon. It's more common to have many. And what we set here is whether what depreciation type we have for monthly depreciation, and then over here is our depreciation type for our tax depreciation at the end of the year. And these are the GL accounts we want to use when doing our depreciation. So we've got diminishing value or straight line depreciation available for both, and you can set your depreciation rates there. So when we want to depreciate our assets, we open up our depreciation module. Now, whereby an asset has actually been purchased, we cannot depreciate that until the capital job is closed. So this mechanism, if the job has not been closed, lets us close any newly purchased items. And then here in the depreciation area, we can use a report to see the items that will be depreciated, and we can see what period we're up to. I actually ran it for February this morning, so I can't show you that again today. And then when we get to our end of year, we can do our tax depreciation. Also, we can do asset disposals through this module as well. So I think that about kind of wraps up this little bit of a taste of the asset area and managing assets in Nimbus. I guess the thing is that this is a core product in Nimbus that is available already. And so if you're interested in knowing more about how to implement assets in your Nimbus database, just yell out and get in touch with a consultant. But I guess I'm just keen to know, is there any questions, Michelle? Have any questions come in from our group today? You're on mute, Michelle.
There you go. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, so a question is, how can we utilize measure readings or kilometer readings for asset management, and what is the process of integrating them into Nimbus?
Okay, so I guess you're meaning when we first set up our asset and we're looking at it here, if we're looking at this, the meter-based maintenance and things like that, is that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, there's different ways of gathering that information, but one of the ways is it might be that you have do a pre-start check on all your plant machinery before you use it each time. So, and often the gear is out on site. It's not necessarily returned to the yard each day. So it might be on a site working on a big roading subdivision or roading development or subdivision for a number of weeks. So the idea would be to potentially record the current meter or kilometre reading of that plant on your device with one of our mobile technologies. And then what that does is that then updates Nimbus with the latest reading and replaces the previous reading with that, and then the difference is recorded against that asset, so it updates automatically. That's one way of doing it.
Right,
so I
thanks.
hope that answers that question.
We have another question here.
Sure.
So for repairs and maintenance and WAF expenses, are these capitalized to the assets or expensed per truck model?
They are expensed. Okay, so the any sort of like running costs like that, they're expensed at like a P&L level, and yeah, so they're not against the balance sheet. Yeah.
Okay.
So they're what we consider the running costs. Yep.
Alrighty. And then one other question here, can we customize these asset item forms?
Yeah, look, I mean, the reality is Nimbus is, I mean, this is effectively a starting point for assets in the system. So, you know, as we talked, we can have, you can, you know, as a client, you have the opportunity to decide what models and tasks that you want to actually create. It might be also that you have different locations. So it might be that you need a code table for your locations if there's multiple locations, and that then means that we can change this to a code table and add any other fields that you require to help you analyze and check different areas of assets. I mean, for example, we have a couple of clients who also have like an asset category field that they've added to their assets table. And what they do is they identify like more than just that level of, is it plant or trucks or cars, but it might be that they have a category that identifies all their light trailers, heavy trailers, and they break it down to the next level so that then they can analyze all the data around their plant materials by that. I mean, that's just an example, but yeah, ultimately other fields and defining characteristics can be added to this core module.
Great. I think there might be one more question coming. I can see someone is typing. Is this webinar recorded?
Yes. Thanks for reminding us. Yes, this webinar is recorded, so we'll be able to send this out. We'll be posting it on our YouTube channel. And Michelle, I believe you send it out to all the people that have attended today. Is that correct?
Yes. As soon as it is up on YouTube, I'll send out a link to everyone.
Great. Hey, well, look, I think that's just about a wrap, isn't it, Michelle?
Yep. Seems so.
Awesome. So, look, really thank you for attending today. Like I said, if you have any questions or want to know more, please just reach out to your friendly consultant or Michelle or Daryl. Great to have you with us. See you next time.
Thank you.
Cheers.